20? 20 minutes?
Supposedly, yes.
Okay. Just stop me. Hello, everybody. My name is Maria Yeroфеева, and I work in Moscow School of Social and Economic Sciences as a researcher. Today, sorry for being late, I had an examination early this morning. Today, I would like to talk about quite a more empirical questions than the previous speaker. And I know that you began with the question, what kind of realism does social theory need? And I would like to reformulate this question to the next level. What kind of realism does social practice need? Because they used to think that a good and a complicated theory means an appropriate methodology. But unfortunately, this is not always the case. And on different levels of our analysis, on the level of philosophy, on the level of theory, on the level of empirical research, they have different requirements on how to carry on this research. So the level of practice imposes certain requirements on the theory. So I would like to show that the question and the problem how philosophy translates into practice is very important, and we shouldn't forget about it when we are discussing such philosophical topics as agency, intentionality, and so on and so forth. And I would like to illustrate my point by referring to an ongoing debate in the field of information systems research. It is a debate between so-called agential realists versus critical realists. And the theme, the topic of this debate is what philosophical foundation should we use for the study of so-called socio-materiality. I will now try to explain a bit of context of this debate, and then I will go on to show that there are inherent difficulties in translating philosophy into practice. So just that you know, information system research is a branch of organization studies, and organization studies, as you may understand from the name, studies organization. Information system research focuses on the role of technologies, usually complex technologies such as information systems, for example, different sites, different programs, software, and so on, and how they are employed in organizations. In other words, how complex technologies shape or influence organizational processes. And it is quite surprising that now, in this practical field, and organizational studies is a very practical field, the scholars discuss the question of social materiality. That is, they discuss the question what is social and what is material and how they relate to each other. So the level of this discussion is highly philosophical. It is highly theoretical, and from the beginning it seems very unusual for this field that they discuss such a philosophical questions. Moreover, interestingly enough, the most cited and the most influential theory in this field now, in the study of social materiality, is a theory based on the works of modern philosopher Karen Barat. If you don't know her, she is a modern philosopher of the movement of so-called new materialism, and her theory comprises elements from quantum physics, queer theory, modern social science studies, and other theoretical resources. So she operates on a highly philosophical level. She even doesn't have any empirical research to illustrate her points. And so it seems very unusual that information system research uses Karen Barat as a theoretical foundation, and agential realism, it is called, the theory that Barat made up. It is very unusual that they turn to such a complex theory. So, first of all, we need to understand why that. And the answer is that Barat's theory makes it possible to describe the indivisibility of the social and the material. But to understand why it was so important for the study of social materiality, for the information system research, we need a bit of history. So, a bit of context. So, in information system research, there was quite a long tradition of using the theory of structuration of Anthony Giddens in their research. In fact, there are a lot of different models of using structuration theory in information system research. But they have two problems which was pinpointed by the critics of modern social material research, and they stresses the necessity to go on to and find new theoretical research. So, what was these problems? What were these problems? The first problems was with so-called overly socialized conception of technology. I will illustrate it on the most famous, I guess, theoretical framework based on structuration theory. It is Orlikovsky's The Practice Lens. Just to remind you, if you forget somehow, that structuration theory of Giddens have two levels of analysis: the level of action and the level of structure. And Giddens stated that from the level of action we can go to the level of structure, because structures are only the aggregation of individual actions. So in the Practice Lens framework of Vanda Orlikovsky, they have the same model. They have the level of action, which is the technology use, and the level of structure, which she calls technologies in practice, that is a particular routinized structure of technology use. And the idea is the realm of action, that is technology use, consists of people, and people choose to use a technology in a certain way. It leads to a conclusion that every part of this model, that is the level of action, technology use, and the level of structure, technology in practice, are all fundamentally social, because people choose to use how to use technologies, or they can easily ignore them if they don't want to react in a certain way. And because the level of structure is the aggregation of the level of action, it is also social. So the practice lens of Vanda Orlikovsky represents an overly socialized view of technology. And critics saw this drawback, and proposed to conceptualize technology as a structural effect. That is, that technology is on the level of social structure. This leads to, we can call it a soft form of technological determinism, because it implies a certain conception of agency when the divide between material agency, technological agency, and social agency. And in this model of agency, if there is a logic of subtraction, as Latour calls it. For example, if technology acts, then people act less. And otherwise, if people are creative and express their individuality, then technology acts less. Therefore, it represents a form of some kind of technological determinism. And as an answer to these two drawbacks, the scholars of information systems turned to a gentle realism of Karen Barat, which helps to overcome these drawbacks. Of course, we don't have time to go into a deep discussion about all nuances of her philosophy, but I will say just some important points about her approach. First of all, according to Barat, reality is not given but performed through relations in practice. So it's a performative theory. And she starts with a situation then they don't have any distinctions at all. So her philosophy is the philosophy of becoming, of practices. And we start with a situation that there is no social, there is no material, there is no man, there is no women, and so on and so forth. There is no distinctions. These distinctions appear in the process she calls a gentle cut. A gentle cut is the process then we encounter phenomenon, and then we make these distinctions. After this, we live in a world where this distinction already exists. But she begins with a situation with no distinctions. More importantly, then we do these gentle cuts. We create objects with boundaries and properties. Before gentle cuts, there are no objects with boundaries and properties. She calls is local determinations of objects. And if we transfer this philosophy into the study of information system, we have a strong social materiality paradigm, which claims that the social and the material are constitutively entangled with each other, because at the beginning, there were no distinctions between them. For example, we conceptualize the materiality of technology as not in the technologies themselves, and not as the effect of the social or human agencies which encounter technology, but as a process of materialization that is enacted in social practices. I know it sounds very philosophical. But what with philosophy do for the information system research? It allows them to show how organizational processes are inherently social material. So how social and material are inherently entangled. And also the other main result is that in this framework, the scholars of social materiality may look at how organization is enacted in practice. that was one part of the discussion. And there is another, that is the position of so-called critical realism. Again, we don't have time to go into critical realism philosophy. Moreover, there are different versions of it. But I just for a context, I would say that critical realism is a philosophical stance that recognizes the potential existence of a reality beyond our knowledge or conscious experience. And the scholars of information system research, they usually uses the morphogenetic approach of Archer to work with. So Archer uses, in her turn, uses Giddens' theory of structuration and criticizes it. For Archer, Giddens' formulation is guilty of what she terms conflationism, that is, of eliding the distinction between agency and structure. Because Giddens formulated that structures are instantiated in action and do not exist on their own. In contrast with the structuration theory, critical realists, based on Archer's morphogenetic approach, offered us the theory that there is a distinction, a very clear distinction between material and social agencies as different elements of correspondingly the level of action and the level of structure. In contrast with agental realism, critical realists can show that how social and material become social material, and what implications this have for the organizational processes. So they have quite a different focus because they start from different theoretical foundation. To end this speech, I would like to show you that there are very important problems with applying agental realism into the realm of organizational studies. And these problems are also noticed by critical realists. Again, we don't have time to cover all the debate between critical and agental realists in information system research, and I will state only 2 points of criticism from critical realists to agental realists. The first point of criticism is that even though agental realists state that there are no distinctions between social and material, this statement itself has 2 inherent problems in it, because when we go to the field to carry on empirical research, we encounter people, our actors, who say, you know, my computer is material and not social. And so actors themselves can point to material, which is also not social. So if we want to our theory be inclusive, for example, as famous actor network theory thesis to follow the actors, this is a problem because in our philosophical foundation there is no distinction between social and material, but in the accounts of our informants there is. And the second problem with this distinction, or its absence for agental realism, is that even though agental realist states there is only social material, there is no social that is not also material, then they make operationalizations for their empirical research. Usually there is an implicit understanding of what they call material, not social material, but material. So on the level of empirical research, a specific representation of material is usually inscribed, which makes it useless to use a highly philosophical and sophisticated theory just to find out that it doesn't work in practice. That was one argument, and the second one concerns the problem of temporality. As I briefly stated, agential realism begins with the conceptualization of practice. It is the philosophy of becoming. And it finally leads us to that agential realism has no temporality at all, because it has no point of departure. Then we should start a research practice. Let's us ask a question. When was the first agential cut done? Barat didn't give any answer for this. And it is also very strange because agential realism is a processual philosophy. So it should have resources to describe organizations as processes. But at the same time, critical realism has more potential to describe organizations as processes, because in critical realism, the point of departure depends on the focal actor of a situation, and they have a perspective of the past and the results of the past and the future, which we will study. So when we're going to apply some theoretical foundation to empirical phenomena, it is usually less sophisticated to imply not the most complicated theory. And to conclude, I don't want to say that, for example, one theoretical foundation is better than other. What I mean is that if we apply highly philosophical framework to empirical studies, we should be very cautious how complex theory translates into practice, because at the end they can face the situation that our theory and our practice is completely disentangled. So I would like to end with a question, with an open question: how to make our theories practical? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.